And we are live. JT here, and welcome to The Huddle. The Huddle is where I sit down with successful people from the world of sport and coaching. It's to learn more about their journey to greatness. Why do I have these conversations? Because success always leaves clues. I want to take a moment to thank you, whether you are watching our conversation on Facebook or on YouTube, whether you are listening to the audio on the podcast. Thank you so much for being here with me and my special guest today. And here's my friendly reminder to you. The mind is like a parachute. It works best, but it's wide open. So my challenge to you is to go all in on this conversation, to remove any distractions and get laser focused on the here and the now. And I guarantee you will gain a valuable nugget of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. I've been looking forward to my conversation with my special guest today. He is returning for our second conversation in the huddle, but you know what? We have so many enriching conversations that I just feel like we wanted to share some of our insights, some of our discoveries with other people. My guest in the huddle today is the founder and creator of PurpleShift. He is now a member of the Calgary Stampeders in the Canadian Football League. My guest in the huddle today is Micah Awe. How are you today, brother?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. Always enthused for our conversations. And before we get kicked off, pun intended, I just really want to take a moment to count my blessings. As you know, counting your blessings is a practice that I challenge myself to do every day. Some days I do it better than others, but I do find the days where I'm most persistent in counting my blessings, I do find that life feels a little bit lighter, a little bit calmer, and a little more peaceful. So, I just want to take a moment to count my blessings that you were able to invest some time and energy into being here with me and our community today. So thank you, brother.
Well, thank you too. Thank you for the opportunity. I appreciate it.
Okay. So, before we jumped on here, we were talking about how quickly life is, unfolded, right? It was only just under 17 months ago where we had our first conversation in the huddle. And as you know, one of the things I always like to ask people and remind people is that life is a game and games are supposed to be fun. So I'm curious, what's an interesting fact that maybe you've picked up in the last 17 months that, maybe a lot of people don't know about you that you'd be open to sharing with our community?
I guess a fun fact, you say like I'm the PurpleShift founder and creator and this and that. The fun fact, and Football Ontario folks would know this, is when you send out the emails to the customer service, for now, that's just me. So that's me right there, responding right there with you. I feel like, I'm not officially not a coach or someone like you that's part of Football Ontario, but I know every kid. Like I'm scrolling through social media, yeah. I'm not even following this kid. They just end up on my feed. I'm like, oh, I know this kid because I've either verified them, I've talked to their parents, I have customer service, some way, somehow I know. I feel like I know most kids in Football Ontario. So that's a funny way, I guess, to kind of count my blessings. But it's also, you can imagine it's taught me so much that, it's just these weird little small lessons that you've realized that you've learned at some point in your life. Mm-hmm. And because of PurpleShift, I'm like, oh, okay, this is when I'm supposed to be utilizing it. Just, man, there's so many different ways I can go about this, but there's so many different skills I've learned at one point in my life that I'm like, oh, okay, let me respond this way, let me do this. And it's just been funny because I think most people think it's actually a customer service rep right now. It's not, but you are talking to me, so I'm learning every single way along the way.
Yeah, no, and it's interesting, right? I love that you shared that, and it was interesting because as in preparation for our conversation today, I was thinking back to we first met probably just about a year and a half ago on a quick Zoom call, and I remember asking you, it was the first time we met. I just said, what can we do to integrate Purple Shift into our TMO ID camps? And it's interesting how the year has unfolded. And you mentioned how you've gotten all these life lessons along the way. And if anyone wants to listen to Micah's and my previous conversation, you can head back and listen to the previous episode on the huddle just to hear again how he kind of got here. But I'm curious, in the last 17 months, you've been behind the scenes, right? You've been helping in terms of customer support, right? For our TMO families, our student athletes, our parents. You've also sat in some meetings with our Team Ontario coaches and, how us planning. I'm curious, what has been one of those big lessons that you've taken away that has really resonated with you throughout this process?
Oh man, it's a tough question only because it's a competitive race because I've had hundreds of lessons. So, I'm trying to bottle it up and put it into one thing. And I guess I did have a thought. And, I talked to the local high school here in Medina Valley High School like a month and a half ago. And I had I spoke kind of about my story, and they actually did a Purple Shift little meaty combine. If you go on Purple Shift, you can kind of see there's a FCA combine. So kind of what you guys helped me create, I've used it with some basically Castroville, Texas here. And when I was telling the story, I always reflect back on podcasts I do or speeches I do and say, okay, how could I have done better? And the one thing I think I should have told that group was that the one thing I've learned, to answer your question, is I've learned like just to keep everything like server based. Like always, okay, how can I serve this person? Because by doing, well, not just how can I say this person, that's not really it. It's really how can I best serve the people I'm helping? Because it helps both people out. When you serve, and me and you, JT, were definitely in cohorts and talking in the beginning of this year, this beginning of this ID. It's such a journey. I wish there should be just a book over this because I'm like, if there's ever a Purple Shift movie, you're definitely going to be starring. I don't know if you're going to be actually the actor or if we'll have like a actor in for you, but you're definitely going to be in the story because basically you, me, and my wife, and I'm just telling her like, oh my gosh, look at this email I just got. But the one thing I learned is that, when people were trying to onboard, and sign up, I thought I had made it as simple as possible, but that was my thought. And, I could have sat there and these emails being like, oh my gosh, like I spent literally hundreds of hours. People think I'm exaggerating. I'm not exaggerating. Hundreds of hours doing this little sign up process, and they still don't get it. But then I'm like, I had to fall back on, okay, how do I do this better? How do I serve them better? And then it wasn't until really the Ottawa camp. So 2 camps later that I finally implemented a little pop-up that comes up and says walk through, like click here to get verified. And now you just click that box and literally just highlights what you need to click. And since that day I implemented, like the hour, because I was getting emails, I've gotten maybe 2 emails about how do I get verified. So what I realized is like by me just focusing on how can I best serve everyone I'm trying to help out, it helps me serve myself too. Because now I'm not answering emails about how to get verified. I'm answering emails. It evolved. The emails evolved from how do I get verified to what's a Purple Shift score? What does this ranking mean? Like I'm looking at the rankings, and so like things that like, oh, okay, now I can get into like the athleticism and like this is how it can help you towards your next level, and this is how it means, how you compare it towards this athlete. So now athletes are worried about what actually matters instead of like, oh, I don't know how to sign up, which is not their fault. It's on me. So that's the biggest thing is like learning how to serve people as best as possible because you end up serving yourself and you just feel better. Now I just feel better about asking those questions like, oh, Purple Shift score. Finally, like I finally got my first Purple Shift score question. I was just like elated because I'm like, it took me 17 months to get to this point, but it was worth it. So yeah.
Okay. Well, it sounds like, and I had a great coach that, she would always reference this idea of like the quality of your questions will determine your quality of life. And it sounds like for you, you started to challenge yourself to ask and challenge yourself in a loving way to ask different questions. Like, what could I do to better serve this person right here, right now? So I'm curious, was there a moment where you started to realize that that's a powerful question? Like that almost reframes it. That brings you back to like why you created Purple Shift and the inspiration behind it. Like, was there a moment where you're like, oh no, that's a question I need to remind myself often?
Um, I guess it's kind of like a era of moments. It was during the holidays or right after the holidays. Unfortunately, my wife's grandfather passed, and I was with the whole family, and I'm getting these emails, and all of them are kind of like in the corporate world or somehow, some way, and they're like listening to me, and they're just like, well, we go through this too. Like it's just stuff you have to answer. And when they kind of gave me the realization that like you're not the first person under the sun to go through this, it's kind of like it's the same thing it's the same thing with athletes. I really compare football as a microcosm life because it becomes a question of are you just going to make are you going to just make an excuse? Like, are you just you either do it or you don't. There, these people are asking me questions because at that point they do want to use it, but either I do it or I don't. Either I make it easier to them or I don't. Like life is 50-50. I try to explain this to my locker room. I think in Montreal and Ottawa, I was like, everything's 50-50. They're like, that's ridiculous. I'm like, I'm an engineer. And I'm saying everything's 50-50 because to me, it's either I make the tackle or I don't. It's either I make the shot or I don't. It's either I make it easier for them or I don't. So I realized at that point, by me telling them my experience, they're just like, I mean, it's going to happen. It's going to keep happening. So either you make the experience better or you don't. So that was like the first time where I kind of just made a decision on, you know what, like I'm going to win this game. I don't want to just survive the game. I'm going to win this game. I'm going to make it so easy that no one ever comes to me about this question. So it became like a challenge. It became like being on D team and being like, all right, I got it. I got my, I got my arse kicked. So now I'm just gonna be the best at it to the point to where no one's gonna even ask this question anymore. And still to this day, like no questions yet about how to get verified. So I know I've gotten better at that. I know I'm not perfect. There's a few things I can do about it, but I made it kind of like a game, a challenge of just like, okay, how good can I be? Instead of this again.
Yeah, and it's interesting. Like it sounds like there was like a powerful reframe for you there, right? Where it's really easy to in life to dwell on the things we don't want to do or that we don't want to respond to, but it takes that discipline, right? And I love how you sort of turned into a game. You're like, okay, my goal here is to make it so this is simple and effortless as we can, because at the end of the day, it helps. So I'm curious. The one thing of what really drew me to beyond your story was I like how when we first met, you talked about Purple Shift being sort of like the SAT of athletics. And what I love about Purple Shift is it deals in numbers, and numbers are objective, right? And I love the fact that you are making it people more aware that these numbers, that if you want to proceed to the next level, certain teams and organizations, coaches, they're basing their decisions on certain numbers, and certain numbers pop. So what has been something you've really taken away as more student athletes and more families have onboarded onto Purple Shift? What are you noticing in terms of like the numbers? Are people starting to see the value in having objective numbers? Yeah, kind of what's been your experience?
Well, yeah, I mean, the the biggest, most surprising thing to me was the top five list. When I first thought of the idea, it was really it really was it had a lot of I took it very, very, very seriously. And only for the fact of right now, and even back in my days when I was high school, there's top five lists everywhere. But especially not even just the ones that are everywhere. I mean, I'm talking about, the rivals top five, the ESPN, And I always thought, like, man, these things are so subjective. And I hated it as a student athlete because I'm like, okay, what do I do to not earn to be top five? What do I do to not earn top 10? Like, how are you guys getting to this moment? So when I made the top five list, I took it very seriously. I'm like, I need to make this look cool, number one, because if it doesn't look cool, no one's going to care. But number two, I kind of already took care of the objectivity with being from Purple Shift. The whole idea of Purple Shift, the whole idea of these numbers is that they're completely objective. And if a kid shows up for the top result based one as number one and the top Purple Shift one as number one, had nothing to do with Purple Shift. It had everything to do with that kid's hard work, that kid's talent. It's not opinion based, it's completely objective. And I think that's the power in it. I think right now, the world, especially in sports, new NIL deals and everyone just throwing themselves out there, which is it's cool, but I believe in earned hype. If you earn your hype, I'm all for it. The moment I see like a new 5-star recruit, I watch their film. That's the first thing. I'm like, okay, why is he a 5-star recruit? And I give my own opinion right there. Right there on the spot, I'm like, okay, I can see that where it comes from. But most of the time, I'm like, now look at some things. Oh, it's his height, it's his weight and stuff. And again, my background, not being the tallest, not being the biggest, that really hit home with me. So those top five lists really are really powerful to me. And to answer your question, it's just what I've learned is that as I'm doing these verifications, I've done probably thousands at this point, thousands of verification. And I can always tell from them turning in their height and weight on if this athlete's going to be in the top percentile or not. And that's really interesting to me because, growing up, at least in Texas, I can't say for, in Canada, Ottawa or, Ontario, but there's always kind of been this stereotype that like, the kids who are hard workers and detail oriented are overachievers, like not that talented, but, they're overachievers and, wow, good job. But it's like, there's always that kid who's not as talented, doesn't pay attention to detail, but you can tell has a lot of talent, but just isn't there. He's raw, raw. And I think that's a huge misconception that the hard worker overachiever isn't also the most talented, isn't also the most athletic. And in fact, what I've learned is if you look at pro anything, pro professional football, basketball, LeBron James is one of the hardest workers. We all know for a fact Kobe Bryant was one of the hardest workers. All these football players that are on the top of their game, Tyreek Hill, they work extremely hard. So what I've realized is with doing these verifications that the kids that do pay attention and do the height and the weight like the example says, or even a better way, tend to be the more athletic ones. And I don't think that's by chance. I think there's something there. I think I need more information to complete that thought, but I can already tell. Like I see their height, their weight, how they do the video. I'm just talking about how they do the video. I'm like, this kid's gonna be in the top 90th percentile.
Well, and I love that you shared that. And it sounds like for you, you started like it's been interesting to watch your journey and walk alongside you with this because it's really been this ongoing process of, what can I do to communicate this in the simplest, most effective way possible. And it's been so cool to watch. Like I've really enjoyed watching your process. So you mentioned the fact of just seeing how they go about their business, right? Like, again, we're asking you to verify height, weight, vertical jump. And again, you are someone, not only are you a creator, but you're a professional athlete, right? Like you've played at the highest level. You've been in those NFL and CFL locker rooms. So what do you notice when there's, let's say, a student athlete that does exactly and follows the process to a T? Like, what are you noticing is, I don't know, just that attention to detail. What are you noticing if they follow the instructions?
Oh, man, it's almost like it's day. I would say it's almost day and night. It's easiest to see when a kid. So basically, height, weight, vertical is what's required before the camp. Usually, if a kid does that back to back to back, they'll probably be the same ones who are able to find their video in the library and transfer it for 40-yard dash video from the camp, their 5-10-5, whatever it is, they get everything done. And they generally are at the top. And now this is the crazy, funny slash, yep, coaches used to say this all the time moment is, we've always heard, and I believe this too. Yeah, I'm a professional athlete. I'm going my 6th year and I started linebacker, this and that. But coaches always say there's someone out there who's more athletic than you that's not playing. Like there's always someone better than you out there that's not playing. And I've always heard that, especially in Texas, because I'm sure that's true. And it's funny because as I'm doing these top 5 lists, basically sometimes there's a huge gap between like maybe the first place person, the second place person, not necessarily because there wasn't any athletes that were in that second place part, but it's because they didn't complete their height, their weight. There's something made them ineligible. And yes, this is for Purple Shift and stuff like that, but to me, I'm like, wow, this is just like real life. Like when a coach says like, pay attention to detail, do this and do that, and you don't do it, you just disregard it, you're basically making yourself ineligible. Like, yeah, you were the top athlete, but since you didn't follow the directions, you didn't pass your class. I mean, that's the biggest SES. You didn't pass your class. Coaches on the next level can't recruit you. Yeah, you're number 1, but hey, you got to go a different route until we can see you, until we can play on the field. So it's kind of like that attention to detail it's very simple, but if you do it, you're automatically better than 90% of people. Mm. And it's Purple Shift's just making that more obvious, I guess. And it's sad to me because I see the numbers. I see that this kid had a projected height in this, but they didn't verify it. So I can't take that number because objectively it has to be verified. Yeah. So it's a little sad to me, but at the same time, I'm hoping like maybe they hear this podcast and they're like, oh man, I'm one of those guys. And if you are, it's okay. You're still young enough to recover. But I've seen it in a personal story. After Tampa Bay rookie minicamp, I was sitting with a buddy that I had, for 3 days straight. He was a defensive tackle, and we were buddies and blah blah blah. And of 90 people that they invited, undrafted rookies, only 3 of them got signed. I was 1 to 3, and they dropped the other 3 rookies that they did sign. And he was sitting with me. He wasn't 1 to 3, and I remember him looking at me in the face at the airport. It was the last time I saw him, Tampa Bay Airport. And he just looked at me and said, I don't know what to do. I'm like, what are you talking about? And he said, I left school early, and like football, like this is all I had, and I don't know what to do. Like, I think this is it for me. And he never played again. That moment drove me because I want to play as long as I can. Like I did everything I ever did in football in school was because I want to play past college. So I hope that these kids realize, like, if you want something, every moment you have a chance to make a decision, you're either making that decision to get towards your goal, or you're making a decision to make you fall back. There's no in between. It's either up or down. So that's my little snippet to those kids, is just like, do what you need to do to get your goal.
And I love everything you shared there. And it was interesting. And it sounded like this idea, and I referenced this when recently when I was speaking to our U16s at our development camp. I referenced a quote, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I remind them that you're always being evaluated in life, like you talked about, right? Like you have the power to make a decision in this moment. And either that decision's either going to get you closer, one step closer to your goal, or you're going to take a step further away from the goal. And it's interesting when you really start to break those down into, one decision at a time, you start to realize that one decision becomes 2, 2 becomes 4, 4 becomes 16s. And like success is pretty simple. It's just making focused, goal-achieving decisions more often than not.
Yeah, man. It really is that simple. And what I learned with the Purple Shift process is, like, at some point, I can only make it as simple as turning your height, your weight, your vertical jump. And that's when I see the separation. I start to see the separation from that moment, numbers-wise. not even just behavior wise or how you act, but just numbers. If a kid does it back to back to back, they usually are one of the top athletes. Mm-hmm. And take that as you will, that information.
Well, and you bring up an interesting idea, right, around behavior. And it makes me think about my time in education where, I'm a firm believer that everyone has greatness inside of them. But again, it's making that decision to bring that greatness to the surface in every moment. That's the separator. So I'm curious, what have you learned about behavior in the last 17 months that you didn't really maybe fully understand, but now through walking people, simplifying them, getting them on board, like what's been maybe an aha you've taken away about human behavior?
And you asked me some real tough questions only because I'm still like marinating in it. Because a lot of it's reflection on me too. So it's kind of like I'm learning behaviors, but I'm seeing pattern. And I think something that I've kind of learned, and I'm trying to put my thoughts together, is, and this is another, I think this is a huge thing I'm about to say just because it's pattern recognition. Because I compare it to football, I compare it to my life, I compare it to Purple Shift, is you do complex things, you do great things, you do very successful things by doing a chain of very simple, easy stuff. So I'll try to compare it to, I'll do football first. So when I first started football in 7th grade, I played fullback, and the first plays I ever learned were 32 ISO and 31 ISO. I know not much about being an offensive player right now because I'm a defensive player, but I know 32 and 31 ISO. Like those are the A gaps, 34, 36 B gaps. Like, so from those simple little things, now as a linebacker, I know, there's not an A and 1/2 gap. There's just an A gap, and maybe there's a 2I, but like, it's very simple things that make this complex football game that we play. Now to compare it to Purple Shift, me building this app, it wasn't like I started, it's not like I called some neuroscientist or some rocket engineer and say, hey, okay, how do you build the app? No, I started with a login page. Okay, what I need a login page. I need a first name, last name, a button. But then you do that over an entire app. Now it's this complex app that can submit verifications and get video verified. It's this complex thing. So I realize now, talk about customer service and talking to people, is if you're not simple, you got to be simple. You do it by doing the simple things. You work on the simple things. You work on the so-called easier things. But you got to imagine, if you're the best at that little thing, if I'm the best at taking a read step, I'm better than everyone in the world at doing it as a linebacker. It'll show on film. I'm probably going to get recruited over and over again because I'll never take a false read. And that's something that my high school coach Sample, did. He put those little bags behind me, and if they ever moved backwards, we would have up downs. I did that for 3 straight years in high school, and I still don't false step. So it's just the little things. It's all about the little things. And when I say that, I say in a fun way, it's like, it's actually an advantage. It's to everyone's advantage because the little, small, simple things are possible for everyone. Like it's not like I'm saying, oh, you need to learn the hard things and some people don't get the hard. No. Do what you do, the simple things. And as you do those simple things and you add them together, it becomes this complex thing that, oh my gosh, how they do that? And you're like, well, time and effort. Mm-hmm. And everyone can do time and effort. As long as you're on the earth, you got time. As long as if you put in effort, and those are 2 things you can control, which that's a whole nother story. It's probably a whole nother podcast. But as a professional athlete, if you don't understand that you can only control what you can control, you will never make it past the first day of camp. That was what got me to be a professional athlete, is that I knew I was fourth string as a will linebacker at Tampa Bay's camp. I did not care. I just knew that I got 4 snaps each team period to show what I got. Those 4 snaps turned into a whole career. Mm-hmm. If you understand that, then you're setting yourself up for just the most complex things in life.
I love what you shared in the fact of, and what I really heard from you was this idea of like complexity is the enemy of greatness. And I love how you reference this idea, thinking back to you as a linebacker, like perfecting the craft of just having a great first step, right? Your read step was great. And I just think back to how even just simply doing that great, what allowed you to stack a win really quickly, right? On the first snap of the ball, right? You stack a win. And then how once you stack one win, it's then easier to stack a second win and a second win, a third win, a fourth win. So I'm curious, how important is that, right? And if we go back to you as a professional athlete, does it make it easier once you stack those simple wins? Does it make it easier then to make a second win, a fourth win, an 8th win, a 16th win? Like, does it make it a lot easier even at your level?
Oh man, I guess I'll put it all in one play. I guess I have a story for everything you say. So my most memorable play, I've realized, as I'm talking to my guy, my friend I'm training with, Keegan. I keep on telling him about this one play because right now I'm working on my conditioning. I'm running a lot with sleds, like to the point where I know football will never be this hard. But that's how I was brought up in Texas, is if your practice is harder than the games, then you become undefeated district champs and become the MOP. That's the formula I know. So, but my one play was, it was my second game starting for Montreal last year. And, I'm on the line scrimmage a lot. I'm coming off like my 6th blitz that series. It was like the third, they've converted 3 first downs already or something like that. Or, I'm coming off the left edge. I come up with a good sprint. I put my hands up, then get it. And I do what every coach says. If you're pass rushing, turn and run. I mean, we've heard, I know you coach it. I know all the coaches coach it. Turn and run. I turned, I ran to the ball. Najee Harris hits the ball out of, I forgot his name, but the receiver's hands. And the ball is 15 yards away. But again, I don't even know. Time and distance are just, I don't know where they are. I just get to the ball somehow. I get to the ball, and because of my burst, because of how I train, I always train with like a 3-step, a 5-step burst. And Darius is going to be mad about this, but Darius Pickett was closer to the ball and facing forward. But my burst was so quick, and he even admitted it. He's like, "Man, Micah, I was getting the ball. It was going to be a pick 6 for me," because he thinks he would have got a pick or a fumble 6. But my burst was so good that I got the ball. I got the opportunity. And even though I got caught with 3 yards to go, this is why I'm training so hard. This is why I train with a sled behind me, because I'm like, that monkey that's going to be on my back next time is going to at least feel lighter. So, so that whole play of me getting to the ball, it's because of how I trained. So what I'm trying to say to everyone listening is, like, if you're great first step. So my great first step turned into a great 5-step burst. So now I have a better 5-step burst than most of my teammates. So now that gives me an opportunity on the ball. But if I never had that great 5-step burst to begin with, then maybe I'm not talking about the story right now. And then now the next part of that is, the better you are at whatever you do, and it can be whatever. Like, an easy way to explain it is, if you're a defensive end, and I try to tell the young guys going like professional this all the time. It's like, yes, coaches want consistency. Yes, they want you to stop the run. They want you to do all this stuff. But if you can be consistently great, that's what makes you a Hall of Famer. That's what makes you a Pro Bowler. And what I mean by that is, if the coaches can depend on 1 sack per game from you, think about an NFL player getting 1 sack per game. That's 17 sacks a season. You do that for your whole career, you might be the next Reggie White. You are the next Reggie White. But we're not talking about this complex 5 sacks a game, 6. We're talking about one. That simple, hey, we're gonna put Mike out there. He's gonna get us 1 tackle for loss in the crucial point in the game, and we're gonna win the game because of that. Aaron Donald in the Super Bowl. I'll never forget. McVay was out there. It was 4th down, and he literally called it. He said, "Here comes Aaron's gonna get a sack right now." Sure enough, he got a sack. They won the game, MVP. But it's because of that one simple thing that you know he can do. It sets you up. So because of my 5-step burst, now that kind of gives you a little bit of leeway when there's someone maybe just as good as you. But your first step was so good that, okay, move. You might have that second step might be bad, but then the third step, you recover and you win. So that's what it actually helps you with as a professional athlete, because when you get a professional athlete, most people are good to above average. There's very few that are elite. And then there's the battle of the elites. So when you're going against another elite person, that's when it comes down to, okay, what are you good at? What am I good at? That's when it's like a card game. It's really like a card game. And you really have to be the best at what you do, because he's going to do what he does. You won't, maybe might not be able to stop it, but can he stop you? So it becomes really fun. And that's like a whole nother level of just elite play that you really have to work for that too. I didn't really see that until I got into the CFL, honestly, to where I'm like, okay, there's this elite person I'm going against. That's when it becomes fun, because you know he's a 2-time, 3-time All-Star. What can I do against him? So anyways, that was a lot to say, but I just felt like it's like saying my story, I guess.
Yeah, no, and it's what I really heard from that idea was that the power of consistency, right? Like you talked about, like, what if, for a football context, you were that person that had 1 sack a game? What if you had that 1 tackle for a loss? What if you were that one person that averaged 5 yards a carry, right? And you start to understand that, and it's interesting that you're not the first professional athlete that has said that on this podcast. Is when you get to that level, the gap between the top to the bottom is it's pretty razor thin. But again, it's that person. How consistent can you be? Mm. So I'm curious from the consistency standpoint, because I'm a firm believer consistency creates confidence, right? The more consistent you are, you start to develop a different level of confidence. Now, from your experience, those people that are the most consistent, are they people that are typically dwelling on weaknesses, or are they finding those opportunities to really strengthen and amplify their gifts, their talents, and abilities? I'm really curious, because again, you've been in those locker rooms.
Oh man, that's a great question, because it's almost like if life was a game, it's almost like if you want to achieve Hall of Fame status, you must unlock this mindset. A lot of it, I mean, it's all about mindset, and this is when I kind of I kind of fell upon this as a mindset for me as a football player. And one of my coaches, he told me this, Coach Chamberlain from Toronto, in 2019. This is like towards the end of the season, and we weren't doing that well, but he had this quote that I just remembered. Not a quote, I guess he was just talking, but I had this for the rest of my life. I kind of was like, okay, I understand this now. He said a okay player doesn't really learn from their mistakes. They just play and just take it day by day and just don't really learn, just go on. A good player learns from their own mistakes. So I thought that was really interesting. I'm like, okay, I've always heard that. So that's what good players do. They learn from their own mistakes. And then he said, a great player learns from other people's mistakes. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. So, and that's a powerful one too. That's really powerful, because I'm like, okay, if I'm a 4th string linebacker in training camp and I see the 3rd string mess up, I probably don't need to make that same mistake because I'm 4th string. So that automatically, I was like, okay, I get that. That's why I made it this far, because yes, I take pride in being smart. Is engineering hard in the football? No, that was a huge advantage for me. So I took advantage of that because so that way, consistency wise, oh, Micah, he won't mess up. And if he does mess up, he'll make himself right. That was my one consistent thing from the unathletic standpoint. But then he said this one last thing, because I'm like, oh, hold on, there's another tier to this. He said, legendary players learn what other people do great. And that's when I was like, I'm talking about that practice. I immediately used it because I'm like, okay, this linebacker, coach always talks about how good he pass rushes. I'm going to look at him. Okay, this is a defensive tackle that can hold point really well. I'm going to look at him. So I watched during the season, I watched CFL film, I watched NFL film, I watched college film of some of the best linebackers, some of the best O linemen, and I try to see, okay, what do they do really well, and how can I use that move? I literally, my pass rush moves, I watch NFL film of guys doing NFL because I'm like, they're getting paid tens of millions of dollars to do this same move. I'm a human. I believe I can do anything they can do. So I'm going to do it. So that's when I realized like there's 4 levels. And now I'm at the point to where I'm focusing on, yes, I'm really good. I think I'm really good, but there's some humility behind being like, okay, this guy is known for being a TFL all-star. What's his first read look like? What does he look like? And then I emulate that suddenly. Now move on to the next guy. Okay, I got that down. Now move on to the next guy. So that's really how I think. So I'm always looking to see, you know, for example, Cam Judge. I think he does a lot of things really good. So I watched all the games this year already of Calgary last year. So I already know like all his moves. And I'm gonna implement whatever I feel like I need to get better at. So it's just that's the most amazing thing I probably heard. And that was in 2019, and I never forgot that. That's an easy one to remember.
And it's interesting how it sort of came full circle to how we started this conversation, right? And that was the whole intention between starting the huddle is like we've been programmed and conditioned to when we see people that are successful to copy what they do. But really, if you listen to what you just said, it's studying how they think, that you're studying their film, like you're watching their mannerisms, you're studying film, you're seeing how's it they actually think here? How are they using this? When are they using it? And it's funny that again, it comes back to like success always leaves clues. So it's like getting in that mindset of legends study. You know, they borrow wisdom from other people who are achieving a certain level of success, and then they make it their own. And that shortens that, you know, that path to greatness.
Yeah, and you know, I don't know why. I really don't know why, but I've always been a huge Bruce Lee fan. From this little kid from Nigeria, didn't watch much TV. I don't even know why it came up. Maybe it was because I played the game Tekken or something like that. But Bruce Lee was always something. But so I took it upon myself 2 weeks before my wedding, as I'm getting ready to watch a documentary as I'm cleaning up the house of Bruce Lee, and he had said, you know, it's similar to what my coach said. He said that he created his style of martial arts, and he didn't like the word style, because he felt like style puts you in a box. And as I'm listening to him, I'm like, man, he has a lot of the same like fire passion I have, because he was saying like, why put me in a box? Like if this style doesn't work against this, then why would I use it? Like, you know, that's where the whole be like water things come from. So, but then he mentioned how he said, oh, he watched like Muhammad Ali. He watched all the great boxers of the time to gain stuff. So it's like, yeah, he has his own thing. He's great in his own regard. Yet he's not big enough to be like, oh, I don't watch boxing. That's not martial arts. He's like, no. What can I learn from them? So it's so amazing that, you know, these Aaron Donald. I'm thinking about Aaron Donald, and he had those. Go on Instagram right now. He's biting knives and doing all this martial arts stuff. His footwork's crazy. So he's doing all these things that you can say nothing to do with football, but I don't know. I haven't seen anyone really block him consistently either. Yeah. So life is really cool when you see it as that game, and it's just so cool to just even see different disciplines too, like talking to you, seeing how you think. The more humble you become, like the better you become. And
Mm,
it's fun to like be humble. It's fun to be like, okay, what do you do with your life, and just like ask questions so that you can gain, because you're really gaining. It's a selfish thing, but it's not selfish. It's weird. When you
yeah.
give, you actually receive too. So
Yeah. It's so interesting talking to you because I think what has connected us from the get-go is like just your curiosity. Like, what can I do to get better today? And I love like everything. I just love how your mind works. And it just reminded me, I had an opportunity earlier today. I popped into a local school to visit a friend, just thank him for something he helped with. And he said, "Hey, you want to talk to this business leadership class?" And he said, "What words of wisdom would you offer?" I said, "What I want you to understand is in life, every experience is setting you up for something greater. Like there's no positive, there's no negative, it's not good or bad. I just want you to know that you're here for a reason, right? It's not by coincidence, not luck. But I want you to understand everything that is happening into your life up to this point is putting you on a path to something greater." And I remember just looking at them, and some were like, "Oh." And so I find it very similar to what you were talking about, right? Like Aaron Donald doing, the martial arts. It's setting him up for something greater, right? But again, he had to be open to that. You had to be open to learning and watching film of different NCAA, CFL, right, NFL athletes to get to something greater. So yeah, it really resonates with me what you're saying.
and I love what you said, because it's so true. I told the kids that meet of Medina Valley, just told them like, you, and this is how I felt when I first built Purple Shift. Like I'm talking about day one, when I was thinking about like, why am I doing this? And I really am doing it because I know someone, and it's funny because I didn't tear up. I felt pretty emotional. A kid who I talked to in Medina, he messaged me back. I guess I talked for like 30 minutes, but he said this one thing back to me, and I was like, I kind of reflected like, oh, I mean, that's true. And he said he loved, or he understood that I told him, hey, whatever you're doing right now, you got to keep working hard. You can't give up, because someone in the future is depending on your success. Like it might be a child, it might be a friend, it might be some random someone in the future. Their path, their life is dependent on what you're doing. So you really can't give up, because if you give up, they can't. They maybe it'll be harder for them to get there, or they maybe just won't have the opportunity. And the reason why I said that is because I'm thinking like, okay, if Purple Shift blows up, there might be some kid in Nigeria who's just like me that never gets to America like my parents did on a visa lottery, but maybe they would have got there through athleticism. And if Purple Shift is not big, it's not big enough, there's no opportunity, because they can't make Purple Shift, but I have the opportunity to make it. So it's like you are in every single person in this world. There wouldn't be 7 billion people on this earth if we weren't meant to help each other.
Mm-hmm.
We would just all be in individual pods that have
Mm-hmm.
nothing to do with anyone else. So you just have to keep going. Like I don't. And if you think about that, I just feel like I got to keep going. I don't know. I got to keep going. And plus, too, from a football standpoint, selfish standpoint, like my little brother's a linebacker. I don't want to beat any of my records. Like, you want to go so far ahead that, he's not able to be like, oh, I beat your record for 4 years professionally. So just why you got to keep going. You got to
Yeah.
keep going.
Well, I
So,
think it's what you're sharing is that idea of when other people create success in their life, whether it's in football, whether it's in their relationships, their finances, their career, you're simply showing other people what's possible for them because we all have the same greatness inside, right? And it's like almost when you start to understand that everyone has greatness inside them, and like you've mentioned, like that humbleness to be like, oh, I see the greatness in you. I see the greatness in you. It's just
yeah.
life just feels different, right? And it's just you start to show up different. You start to inspire others, and you start to just empower others to reach their next level of greatness.
Exactly.
Okay. So I'm curious, but I want to be respectful of your time and energy. I know, again, a lot of our Football Ontario community has really been enjoying. They've benefited from, really seeing what Purple Shift can do. What would the best way for someone to learn more about Purple Shift, maybe start using it, or even just to connect with you? What would be the best way?
I mean, honestly, if you have a question, I'm like, yes, I'm about to go into football in a month and stuff like that, but just DM me, DM either Purple Shift or my personal account. Like, I'm very open, or email me. To me, I'm not one of those people, like, if I don't have time, I'll get to you when I have time. So I think that's the biggest thing. And really, honestly, again, me and my buddy were thinking, and this is for the future, it's going to come out, so I'm going to kind of tease it now, but I've learned that now that we're kind of the growing pains of signing up and all that, it's gotten better. It's not perfect. Don't get me wrong. It's not perfect, but it's gotten better. Now the focus has been kind of like, there's a Team Ontario chat. And I mean, kids are asking, have you got a playbook? Kids are asking like, okay, what, they're asking all these questions that are more like student athletes. And that's when I'm like, hey, I've been through, I'm a pro athlete currently. I can help y'all out. So I plan on honestly doing more podcasts and stuff like that. But on the app, I plan on having kind of like I don't know what we're going to call it, but like a training book in a way. So there'll be a tab just for it. It'll be a Purple Shift guidebook. And it's like, you will have something like that says, maybe say speed. And I'll have all the speed workouts that I'm doing or other professional athletes are doing that you just watch. And it's not people that, you can't post it. It's just Purple Shift is posting it. That way it's like official, like this helps with your speed. Read steps as a linebacker. Read steps as a O-lineman. Like I'll be talking to my quarterbacks, maybe Meyer will be on there as, what am I looking for in cover 2 and talking to you. So I think that's probably going to be the biggest thing for Purple Shift is just like being just like a big brother. If I knew, big brother or sister, if I knew the knowledge I knew in high school, forget my athleticism. If I just knew what I knew as a professional athlete, you're going to look like a 5-star athlete. I don't care who you are. So let's try to create that generation, because I feel like Canada has a huge potential. And the reason why I said that is because I'm a huge numbers guy. And, most people, kind of give the excuse, well, Canada has, a 10th less population than America. I'm like, oh, okay, that's okay, true. But then I'm like, wait, that's also the fact for hockey. Yet Canada's dominant in hockey. Oh, I'm like, then I just threw that excuse out the way. I'm like, oh, then it means it has nothing to do with the population. It has everything to do with, I think, knowledge. If you know how to train, you become faster. If you know how to read, you become smarter. You get more TFLs. So I think if Purple Shift can be that extra thing that coaches can use as a tool, hey, like go home and watch an hour of film on Purple Shift. We will be that. So that's what we plan on doing to kind of just help, because it's like you're going to test, you're going to get what you need or what you are. Now the next thing is that the next time you test, 1% better. Because eventually, when you're young, you skyrocket. But then when you get like my age, 1% is a huge difference. Jumping a 39.5-inch vertical to a 40-inch vertical is a lot of explosiveness. So it might seem small, but it's actually a lot bigger of a step. So it's all about getting better. I don't want people to think Purple Shift is just like a one time, forget it until next year. I know a lot of kids, it's doing enough from 90. It's going to do enough from 90 to whatever the number is. If you just take that as a kid and you just like, oh, till next year. If your goal is to move on to the next level, and we all know the story. Michael Jordan did not make his high school basketball team. Michael Jordan got cut. What you said earlier, when you see success, it gives other people inspiration. Oh, I can do that too. If you've been cut, you can still be the GOAT of your sport. Mm-hmm. If you were a 6th round pick that barely played at Michigan, University of Michigan, fourth string, you could still be the GOAT of your sport. I don't, so then there's no excuse for anyone. To me, just be the best you can be. So that's what Purple Shift I hope becomes is, it's not it right now, but like, as we move forward, we're just information, more podcasts with you. I really believe that it's just going to be about knowledge and hopefully it just grows and grows and grows. So it's helpful to everyone who's on there somehow, some way. And then even one day, maybe transition from sports. Like I'm probably gonna have that's gonna happen to me one day, but I'll go through it. So then I'll be able to have things that help with that, So anyways, there's a huge plan behind this. And I have huge goals, but I've never been the one to have small goals ever. I mean, the one time I learned this was I was talking with my coach Sample. He's like a second father to me. He's my high school football coach, linebacker coach. And it was my junior year going to my senior year, my last year, in high school. And he asked me, "What are your goals for next year?" And I knew he has high standards for me. So me as a little junior, I'm like, defensive MOP. And he looked at me with like a concerned face. And I was like, I just said defense was that too high? I was thinking that's probably too high. That's unrealistic. He's like, defense MOP. He's like, no, MOP. You should just be the most outstanding player, the most valuable. That's it. Like, not defensive. That's for someone else. You're going to be most valuable player of the district. And I got it. And that was the first and last time I'll ever, let someone convince me, don't make a dream too high, like be realistic. That was realistic. In my mind, I thought I could be MVP. I just said defense MVP to kind of like ease the crowd. But my crowd was Coach Sample, and he's like so much. And I love him, and I think he was a really crucial part of my life because that just taught me mindset. Is don't ever settle for this is just who I am. No. Shoot for that, and if you fall down, then you still land on a star. So mindset, that's huge. I'm so thankful for Coach Sample for that because I'm still that way.
Absolutely. Hey, it's interesting, and I'll sort of share this last idea is, hey, success in life is 95% mindset, 5% strategy, right? And mindset really is everything, like you said. Mike, I want to take a moment to acknowledge you. I want to acknowledge you for the great man you are, the great husband, the great son, the great, teacher and coach and mentor, but more importantly, like the amazing human being you are, in this, year and a half that I've come to know you. It's been amazing just to see what a deep passion you have to help and serve and enrich the lives of others. And it's really a blessing, brother. You inspire me to just see you walk your journey and to keep reaching for those stars. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be part of your journey.
Well, no, thank you. And I'm not perfect, but I try my best. I'll always try my best. So again, I'm just so thankful. I honestly am. I really wish I could show I'm living the dream in my life. It's not that, don't sit here and think that every day is just hunky-dory, but being a kid from Nigeria who, again, I just think about, I asked my mom like this last summer, like, wait, how do we get to America? And she said, her friend told her to sign up for this visa lottery, and my mom being a doer she is. And that goes back to what I was saying earlier. Like, if my mom had given up or not paid attention to detail and signed up for that visa lottery, I literally would not be on this side of the earth right now. But because of her and my dad bringing us over here, now I have this opportunity to then use my talents to help another kid, at least one, explore their talents, and then so on. So I'm just so thankful, playing professional football and doing Purple Shift. That's a dream. That's a dream, and all I have to do is work hard. That's the only thing that's required is work hard and be a good person and have people like you who are amazing to help in football Ontario. Like it's not possible without these kids having a dream.
Mhm.
So it's all about having a dream. So just keep shooting for it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, folks, Micah dropped so many valuable nuggets of wisdom that will not only help you succeed in sport, but more importantly, in the game of life. But as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, knowledge is potential power. It's the consistent and focused application of great knowledge that actually creates great results. So, my challenge to you is to take one of these valuable nuggets of wisdom and go apply it to your life today. And as I like to remind you every week in the huddle, you are deserving of greatness. You are worthy of greatness. You are greatness. And my only ask from these conversations is if it enriched your life, if it touched your heart, then please share it with a friend, a teammate, a loved one, just anyone you feel that would benefit from hearing this enriching conversation. And the more people we have listening, understanding, applying these simple principles to their life, the more blessed this world will be. As always, I look forward to chatting with you next time in the huddle. Have a blessed rest of your day.